Change management was about approving what things to do, where to spend the development effort, and actually checking out whether it was good enough. But if we build something ready, it's not yet realizing to users. So therefore, we need deployment management and release management. And within this one, has been a different kind of interpretations about what the deployment means and what is the release management and what happens first and what happens after. But I will clarify the latest interpretation here that is the same that is commonly used nowadays. And the illustration here in the quote slide is that different kind of changes require different kind of deployment and release. And they're depending on the environment, the approach is very different. So if you're deploying a new Windows workstation version that includes new hardware, you will need to plan it very carefully and include all the individuals, and they will require training and data backup and handling of physical hardware, and that is a very complex one in that sense. But if you're running, you're developing your own code and changes, and you put some feature toggles on those ones, then you can build those and deploy them into your environment without them showing into your users, and then you can release them in by user or by group or by certain date by just adjusting those feature toggles whether they're on or off. So therefore the deployment happens in a very automated way, and then the release management is really about mental decision when and how, and requiring also, of course, the communication and the training to users. So I would like to emphasize, even though there are a lot of technical things here, that remember the users and the stakeholders and the communication. So if something works differently than before, you might imagine from your self perspective, from as a user, how annoying is that you are not informed and you don't know how to act. So remember also the communications. That is a very important one. So release management and deployment management are related but two very distinct processes. The release management is what and when we are going to give to the users, and then the deployment management is how it technically goes where it should be. So that is the and you might conclude that you cannot release something that is not deployed. That's the perspective. The technical deployment must happen before the release is complete. But on the other hand, usually the release has a longer life cycle because you will start gathering changes for a certain kind of release and plan what to release together and how to communicate about them together. So first starts the release management and happens deployments, and then it ends up again with the release management about with the communications and closing and confirming that all the deployments were successful. There has been different kind of interpretations from these ones. I mean, one way, especially in software, has been that you need to release something publicly before you can deploy it to customers. That was one way of thinking. But nowadays, when the focus is about the internal communications, taking things into use, and DevOps, so within our context, we do deploy stuff into different kind of environments. I mean, test, GUI, production, and then we only release stuff that has been deployed and tested to be working. So therefore, this current view is the most appropriate use of this terminology. So we decide and build individual changes, but take them into use happens here and we want to do it in most optimal way, meaning about timing, scope, quality, and in most of all in a controlled manner that is suitable for the situation. Traditionally, we have had technology that requires downtime for stuff to be done in the production. I recall from 15 years back or 20 years back, the ERP systems had predefined release schedules, and they had 6-month releases, and they started gathering the scope in 4 months prior, so they can test all the changes together and communicate them together, and then also reserve the time to put them into production in certain maintenance window. And that was approach with the tools and opportunities of that time. And nowadays it is something that we can deploy something all the time and then release individually or piece by piece whenever we want, and they don't need to be synchronized. But both are systems to do release management and deployment management, and I think both of them are still in use, even though nowadays the latter one about about having technical capabilities to do things in smaller pieces and smarter is the way to go. All the services should plan how do they do the deployments and how do they do their releases. And when they have planned this one and learned how to do them, they will get the benefits. They will have the quality. There are less negative impacts. Then it's thought out and tested. They will have less uncertainty and therefore likely less failures. So that means that they have improved their risk management and risk position, and they will shortly learn how to do it efficiently. So planning on the paper what is efficient is one thing, but executing the plan is the best way to learn that what actually works and what kind of improvements are needed. So the learning curve is quite quick to figure out that how should you be doing that one. So therefore, make a plan, start executing that one, do the learning, and you will get all these benefits very quickly. So to dive into details of each one of these processes, so release management includes about when to do the releases, who will do the releases, what kind of communication is needed, who will be approving different kind of steps and the scope of the release, and when who will actually keep a track on the deployments that they are carried out and in appropriate way. There might be even tests related to the release management. I mean, of course, testing happens within the change context, but it might be also have some cross-change testing happening as part of the release management. And the key thing is to decide that what changes are to be released at the same time, because that is related to communications to different kind of parties. And when making a plan about the release management, you will decide on what tools to use to manage the change information, what tools and information to use for communication, and thus what is the nature of the releases. Do they require uh, this kind of planned human-to-human training or e-learning, or is just informing good enough to take care of the or utilize the new features? Deployment, on the other hand, means technical stuff, putting stuff to where they should be, usually installing a change that has been built into the test environment or production environment. And this is something where you, especially if you're handling non-physical stuff, you can automate things. The release management requires human judgment and different kind of things, but the deployment management is usually technical stuff and therefore very more easily subject for automation. Release policy can be on the corporate level or at least in the service level. I mean by this one that if you think about it from the user or stakeholder perspective, it would be nice if all the services would have more of a same kind of way to make deployments and releases. I mean, certain timing, certain cadence, certain kind of training, certain kind of informing ways. It would be nice that they would be more of the same rather than every service would have every different kind of way to communicate it every time they do a release. So that's why I consider launching a release policy. It doesn't need to be, it can be of timing, but especially it needs to be, I would consider the communications and the documentation requirements to be the content of component-wide release policy. And if you take it to the service level, you might have these product-specific release policies like new versions every 5 years, feature updates every month, security every 3 months, every security updates every month, and only exceptionally some security updates during the month. That's a kind of policy that Microsoft has, for example, for operating systems. And with the policy, it's easy for the stakeholders like the business to plan their activities. They know that when to train their users or when to prepare for that the services are changing. The release package is a set of things that are released together. This concept can be considered in a way like when you ship a workstation, you have the hardware and certain software. So what gets shipped today is a release package. You can manage this as an idea that what is the contents of a new release. Or you can consider this release package as an idea that what did we deliver on that store at that day. So that's like a documentation of certain set of configuration items. This course doesn't talk about configuration management. It's most likely coming because it's so important. But still, configuration items are referred to be pieces of hardware or software that you are managing, and usually they appear in the configuration management database, which is the information content within your IT service management tool about the services and the components and the relationships between them. A deployment plan, what steps to take. There might be guidance for that one. And of course, as I said, the more modern deployments you do, the more happens by the tools with an automation. And by environment, we mean these kind of different versions of the service that run separately and that we use for in the development and testing purposes to validate the new features and the functionality of the system with the new features, of which, of course, all the services should have at least one environment, the production, which is used for uh, actually for delivering the value and part of the business processes. Oh, in real life, all the services do their releases and deployments in a little bit different way. The generic approach is almost the same for everything. So first of all, you need to plan that what you're going to release and when. So that means about timing and scoping and the related resources that you need to do the job to get all the job done. And plan that one first because that sets the frame that what changes are you going to include in it. Then there happens the technical work. You will build the software, you will get the hardware, you will actually test that whether they work, and you might validate your work with the users and make some security and other tests and validate that it meets the requirements. Of course, it's about detailed gathering of those requirements in the scope of changes that you're going to make, but also then testing whether they are met. Eventually, before moving into production, make a check that are all things done. I mean, are the tests complete? Is the documentation done? Is the training materials ready? Is the communication messages ready? It's better to validate that those ones exist. It's the same amount of work, but if you do it in a controlled way in that stage, then the rest of the stuff should be very easy because you don't need to create any new artifacts anymore after that one. Then you actually deploy the stuff, the technical stuff in the live environment, meaning the production environment, according to the plan that you have created. And then once you have deployed it in the production, you will, of course, it usually includes tests in that environment. And then you do the rest of the work. I mean, you mark the changes complete, and if the deployment removed some incidents or problems, you will update the information there, and you formally close the release. And before that one, it makes sense to actually stop and think that how well did we perform? What did we learn? What we could do better next time? And utilize those findings to make it work better in next release. So this has been done as long as there been technology. You have deployed something and made it available for users, and you might have some personal experience that it hasn't been as easy or good as it could be. So the most common pitfalls is that we don't communicate about changes happening and putting into production. It's not about it's about coming releases. It's about coming scope for developers and stakeholders, and that's probably the most easiest thing to fix. I mean, create a policy that states beforehand that when you're going to release, so all the stakeholders can anticipate that to happen. So it doesn't require them effort to know when the next set of releases is likely to come, and and communicate how you will communicate about the releases so they know to follow the right channels at the right time. And you can, of course, make a suggestion that what is a good way to do this one, but especially utilize the feedback because that shows that what really works in your context, what is relevant, and improve based on that one. The second one is the inadequate testing. So deploying changes and releasing those ones is the way to break the system. And every change is an opportunity for something to break down. So consider the testing in what makes sense in your context. If you are deploying for a large audience with a large budget, the automated testing and the test portfolio is your way to go. But depending on, I've seen that if the changes go in production manually and you have competent people, then I've seen the same kind of successful results also by humans understanding what they're doing and validating the results. But try to include some kind of verification there in the middle, and at least avoid just blindly putting technical stuff into production. Third pitfall is that the poor planning. I mean, the scheduling, the scope, the resource guesstimations, and so on. So try to start small and especially learn from your doings. I mean, it's not the first deployments and releases that you're doing. So ask the people who know, those who do, what makes sense, what is reasonable, how to make better evaluations, and work from where you are. So you will actually improve quite fast by just trying to improve. And addition to previous one is that if you have challenges in evaluating how much resources you need to debug the changes or releases, so be proactive. Focus on the quality in that sense that you don't need to reserve some time for fixing things after you have released something. You can spend the same effort much more smartly by proactively improving the process and the quality. We earlier talked about risks, so this is a place to ask what can go wrong, especially about the deployments and releases. Those checklists about readiness are a good way to manage the risks. So if you have meeting your checklist, you have already prepared and you have materials ready. But also ask what can go wrong also in the context, because the deployments contain different kind of changes. So and therefore, if somebody knows, then the people who do the work, they know. And it goes all the way the inadequate documentation. What was required? What was the specification for solution? What was we were actually building? And eventually what we were then deploying. So even though this is a very common pitfall in a lot of contexts, consider this technical documentation that you are doing is a very important question and choice. You can spend huge amount of time for that one and it still remains obsolete because you will make the next change that will change it. So you need to find a balance that what level is appropriate level of documentation. I haven't done the detailed technical documentation myself, but the change tickets and the intentions are a good one. And then commented code is of course a second one. But so far my best guess is that ask the people that what kind of people information they would need to find in their context in the future, to do the stuff that has really happened to them so far. And that is usually in the technical, it might be for the technical people the commented code plus the change tickets and some additional change log that what I mean the title level of the features or the idea of the features that tells that if you know the idea that was tried to be implemented, then the rest of the documentation and the code itself will actually tell you the rationale. Or from the release management, ask from the users who use the service or the service owner that what do you really need to know about this one, and then you will get the right level of things, which is usually the one simplified level up that what the real so-called good solution would look like. So release management was about putting stuff into production in a smart way, a combination of changes, and the deployment management was part of that one for technically putting the change in a certain kind of environment, whether it's a development, quality and assurance, or production. But they are all referred to be alive compared to the dead one where the code is only existing in some code library. You have done these once before, and depending on your role, especially agree with your peers within the service that what is our way to do these ones and what do we require to do it well. So formalize it to at least to some level, especially based on the learnings you have done so far.